Okay guys, so, now this may be a little risky given the, zombies, but I took care of some that were in the area, so as long as I don't make any loud noises, I should be fine. So, if you remember last time I talked about, the plans that, for, the apocalypse, but ultimately I didn't, give much insight on that. What to do if you have to deal with zombies. But fortunately, that's what I'm covering this episode. I'm talking about weapons, because pacifists don't tend to last long. Unless it's The Walking Dead, in which case no one cares. Not even the zombies. Now, let's talk weapons. First up, a weapon that's just a tool, but people tend to think of with weapons because it actually is a decent weapon. But not for zombies. We have the knife. Now, not sponsored or anything. Sponsorship died a long time ago. But we got this. This is my personal knife. It's a Gerber. Full-tang handle, fixed blade, straight edge. Now, genuinely speaking, this would be a good knife if it wasn't for the fact that it's not really, meant for a weapon. Now, personally, I don't think knives are bad weapons. I mean, if it's a knife that can chop, slice, or just stab through a skull, that really makes a difference. But a knife like this, I mean, look here. This is the thickness of my skull. This is what it has to be to guarantee a kill. Now, it actually takes up more than the blade. The blade can actually only get up to about here in the skull, based on the spot where it stops. Now, ultimately, this doesn't mean that I can't kill, it just means that it's going to be much harder to kill, and it can always get stuck. Now, if you have a really good knife, that I may recommend, but ultimately, one like this, no. Now, ultimately, I always recommend having a knife on you to use as a tool to make better weapons if you have to in a pinch, or just split-second needing a weapon. Ultimately, knives, recommend having them, but don't recommend using them as your primary, for obvious reasons. Now, when thinking of common household items, to use as weapons, few things come up as high on the thought scale as the hammer. Now, the hammer, actually decent choice. If you have a good hammer, you can do some serious damage with a good swing, and it's a tool that can be used, without needing to be repaired. Ultimately, it's not a bad weapon. Its main drawback is that it takes a lot of force to use. You can injure yourself using it if you're straining yourself, and ultimately, well, it limits your range. I mean, if a zombie's here, you can't exactly kill like this, unless you're really strong. You need a good swing, and it limits your range because you have to get in close to use it anyway. Not close to where they can easily bite you, but they can still grab you. And against a person, wouldn't recommend this. Besides, the head is designed to absorb impact, so something like this, chance it can just slide off. Of course, you can still kill with it, but personally, wouldn't choose it. Now, with that in mind, people tend to get creative with weapons. By that meaning, they make their own. Now, me personally, this is one of the first weapons I made. This is a club made of an ashwood rod with a duct tape handle. I also got some nails going down the top of it to reinforce it. Now, ultimately, this, pretty solid weapon. It's ashwood, meaning it's strong, and it's multi-purpose, because you can do this, 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 or this. Now, ultimately, this isn't what I mean, what I'm judging. Homemade weapons, they can be made out of anything. Ultimately, You're just limited by your resources and your imagination. Personally, if I had the right tools and the right materials, I could make, yeah, very dangerous things. Personally, I say, it's all just dependent on you. You need to be able to, yeah, to come up with something good for a homemade weapon. But ultimately, yeah, homemade weapons take time to make, and you're limited by your resources and materials. So, personally, I recommend finding a weapon before to use while you're working on your weapon to make it. Otherwise, you are in a lot of trouble. Now, after that, pretty popular weapons popularized by movies. Nothing specific, but martial arts weapons like this bow staff here. Now, personally, bow staff, not gonna kill a zombie. But against people, pretty good. For disabling a zombie, it works. But ultimately, martial arts weapons in general, if you know how to use them, can be good. I mean, sure, something like this staff, not gonna kill a zombie. But there are a lot of martial arts weapons. There's swords. Yeah, there are swords, there are knives, there are even punch daggers. One of my favorites. Let's not forget the size. There are even scythes. Ultimately, you're just limited by how much training you're willing to do before the apocalypse. Heck, even in the apocalypse, if you learn how to train for it. But these weapons, you have to know how to use them to be effective. So ultimately, I wouldn't recommend these for most people, but if you're trained and are willing to keep training, and you can get your hands on one of these, well, not a staff, I mean a martial arts weapon that's good, ultimately, I say go crazy. Now after that, you come across something that's similar to a martial art. Now after this, let's talk something less disciplined and something more chaotic. All you fans of the early on Walking Dead will probably know this one. Let's talk Minecraft. Just kidding. Yeah, but this is a pickaxe. Now, most people commonly think that a pickaxe has spikes on both sides, but no, that's actually called a pickmatic. This is a pickaxe. As you notice, it has this thing on the back. Personally, I think this actually makes it slightly more effective, because there's less of a chance of you killing yourself if you swing it back too far. Now this, a lot of killing potential, as noticeable by this giant spike on the front. But ultimately, not my go-to weapon. Why? Well, for one, it's heavy, meaning you need a lot of force to even hold and carry this thing. You need to be in shape to carry it, but a lot more shape to effectively use it. And these things tend to get stuck in skulls. So ultimately, I don't recommend using one of these, but heck, if you don't have anything better, this could be a solid option. And it's a useful tool, too, in case you're cultivating a farm or just trying to clear out debris. Or, if you don't know how to pick a lock, this could be used for opening doors. Now, this isn't really better, but Sledgehammer. Pretty decent weapon. I mean, it's lighter than the pickaxe, less chance of killing yourself, and ultimately, it's a lot easier to use. Now, ultimately, sledgehammers in general, I may not be a fan, but I can see why some people are. Now, main problems with sledgehammers, they cause a huge blood splatter, which, if the virus runs in the blood, any open wound you have will get you infected. Or maybe not even an open wound if it's like in that movie 28 weeks later or 28 days later. Ultimately, sledgehammers also take a lot of strength to use, because they're a heavy weapon and bludgeoning item. Ultimately, though, sledgehammer, I can see why people like it, but it's not my choice. Now, personally, I'm not a huge fan of this one, but probably one of the best ones we've seen so far. Yeah, but personally, just not a fan. Yeah, but you can see why people like it. It's a machete. Now you see, the machete is one of the only, so far, apart from the knife, the only blade we've seen. Why? Because blades are because blades are pretty hated amongst the idiots in the apocalypse community, saying, "Oh, blades need to be sharpened, therefore they're completely discredited." No, they're not discredited. The blade is one of the best weapons, because if you have something like this machete, it needs almost no maintenance. I mean, sure, you have to sharpen it, but you can use a rock to sharpen it. Of course, it's recommended that you get a quality sharpening stone or a knife sharpener for it, but ultimately, you only need rocks. Now, interesting thing about this, though, this machete is a chopping weapon above all else. Now, it can stab, it can cut, but ultimately, it's a chopping weapon, because machetes originally were used as farming tools for collecting sugarcane. Now, personally, not a fan of machetes because I don't really like the way they're used, but ultimately, this is an effective weapon. Probably the most effective one we've seen. You can easily, cut through chop through a skull with little effort. You can decapitate a person if you wanted to, and you can easily take off limbs. Now, personally, I prefer swords over machetes, but that's just personal preference. Ultimately, machete, it's a solid option. But ultimately, I think there are better options, but so far, best we've seen. Now, these are just what I had in my house. But ultimately, we do have one really good option that I recommend for most people. One of the most commonly thought of weapons for the zombie apocalypse. And one of my favorites. We have one of the choice weapons of the Mafia, the baseball bat. Now, all you fans of Z Nation will recognize this weapon. Not even a weapon, it's an improvised weapon. Baseball bat, my personal favorite as far as blunt objects go. This, it's light, does a lot of damage with it, with each swing. And ultimately, there's not much of a reason to not like it. It is a pretty solid weapon. And there are many varieties where you can suit your desires no matter what kind you need. There are wooden bats, aluminum bats. This here is an aluminum bat, but I don't really like aluminum bats. Heck, you can even customize them if you want. The channel ADHD's World has a series called Battle. It's battle, but with the L but it's battle, bat as in battle cut in half, because they make their own baseball bat mods and put them against each other to see who wins. Yeah, based on who's better. Ultimately, it's pretty easy to customize a bat. Heck, you don't even need to change the shape. You can even change the shape by getting a cricket bat. Personally, I prefer baseball bats, though. Now, of course, there is one bat that I will say is above all else the best. The Cold Steel Brooklyn Crusher. The indestructible baseball bat that, as I mentioned, well, it's not indestructible because, as I mentioned, that channel, ADHD's World, they did break a Brooklyn Crusher twice. One by using their entire weapon arsenal, and one by submerging it in liquid nitrogen. But point is, there are many different types of bats, so ultimately, your own personality is what limits you with choosing a bat. Personally, I say this is the best weapon we've covered today, with the machete coming as a close second. Now, which of these weapons would I want? Easy. Bat, machete, knife, and maybe that club. Personally, I recommend having multiple weapons on you at all time, but ultimately, yeah, you can have whatever weapons you want. With that in mind, I think I hear some zombies coming. So, yeah, I think I gotta go. Random Man signing off.